Hello, and welcome back to the channel of the damned gorgeous. So, what are we going to be talking about today? I'm glad you asked me. Today we'll be looking at 3 books. That's right, 3 books. And the thing they all have in common, apart from the fact that they're all books, is the fact that they all deal with supernatural detectives. They used to say detectives detecting the supernatural. First off, we have a collaboration between father and daughter. We have Joe R. Lansdale and Casey Lansdale. Terror is Our Business, Dana Roberts' Casebook of Horrors. So, I've got to say, I'm a fan of Joe Lansdale, and that's why I bought this book. But I've got to say that I had my doubts about this because I'm a little bit skeptical about collaborations in general, and particularly family collaborations. Maybe that's not really very fair, but I think that they can be a bit hit and miss. For example, a few years ago, there was the Sleeping Beauties collaboration between Stephen King and his son, Owen King. Now, from what I've seen of the reviews, I think a lot of people quite disliked it. I didn't dislike it. It wasn't terrible, but I would say it was okay. Certainly wasn't Stephen King's best. I'm not saying that either Stephen King or Owen King, I'm not trying to blame one or the other. I'm just saying that it wasn't the best thing ever. So I've got to admit I was a bit sceptical about this. Also, judging from the title, I thought, okay, it'll be horror, but it will be a bit kind of light. But this book right here, it was a pleasant surprise. It was a pleasant surprise. I mean, Joe Lansdale is a great writer anyway. I don't know anything about his daughter, if I'm honest, but if this is anything to go by, she's a good writer too. It packed more of a punch than I thought it would have. It packed more of a punch than I thought it would. The stories were genuinely, quite menacing in places. Not super scary, nothing disturbing, nothing gruesome, but good solid horror and very entertaining, as you would expect from Joe Lansdale. So I would definitely recommend this. Next up on the list, we have Dark Detectives. So this is an anthology of supernatural stories. Obviously, in each case, there's a detective looking into a case which is supernatural, or apparently supernatural. This book is interesting because it packs some pretty heavyweight names here. You've got Clive Barker, Neil Gaiman, KimNewman. I suppose he's a pretty heavyweight name. Who else? Brian Lumley. Okay, I'm not going to read all the names, but again, you'll have to bear with me because I read this book about 4 years ago, so my memory is quite scant on this now. But I remember it was a very, very good read. It's really worth reading. It's interesting because it also features, for example, there's a story about Carnacki, the ghost hunter. Who is an old-time ghost hunter. Carnacki was created in the early part of the last century. And the first Carnacki story was published, I think, in either 1910 or 1913, depending on which source you believe. If you're sure, please let me know. So you've got Carnacki, who is a historical supernatural figure, which is ghost hunter, which was interesting. Also, running throughout the book, there's a kind of story by KimNewman, which is kind of published in series. So like chapter 1 will be KimNewman, then chapter 3 will continue the story, then chapter 6 or chapter 8, and it runs throughout the book. So this particular story is told in kind of episode form throughout the book. It's a very, very, very good read. I can't think of any dud stories in here off the top of my head. I'll definitely recommend it. Next up, and third and finally, we have got Beyond Rue Morgue, or I should say Rue Morgue, to use the Japanese pronunciation. So as we know, Beyond Murders in the Rue Morgue is an absolutely historic story by Edgar Allan Poe. Essentially, it's the book which is which is credited with creating the detective genre, like Auguste Dupin, C.AustineDupan, the detective in Murders in the Rue Morgue, was the first fictional detective, and he is widely credited with influencing Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, and basically creating the modern detective genre. So basically, all of these detectives, these fictional detectives that came later, owe a debt to C.AustineDupan, and more so to Edgar Allan Poe, who created him, obviously. So, I mean, this story, Murders in the Rue Morgue, was printed in 1841. So, it's quite a few years ago. I was pretty young when it came out, to be honest with you. And, you can't overstate its historic impact. Murders in the Rue Morgue, films have been made of it. It's one of Poe's most famous stories, I would say. Not the most famous, but one of the most, and extraordinarily influential. I mean, I forget who said it now, but someone said that it was a huge. A critic said it was a huge influence on fiction in general, and I would certainly agree with that. So, having rambled on about Murders in the Rue Morgue, what about this book? This is beyond Rue Morgue. So, obviously, if you are a detective yourself, you will have understood that this book will contain stories inspired by the Murders in the Rue Morgue. All of the stories, or at least most of them, feature C.AustineDupan. The Clive Barker pops up again. He also appears in this book. No, sorry, he doesn't appear in it. One of his stories appears in it. I'm trying to be funny, just ignore me. And this book I found, I'll be honest, I think it's the weakest of the three. I found it quite hit and miss. I would say Dark Detectives was a very, very, very meaty read. I came away from this. I enjoyed pretty much all of the stories. They were very varied, but I enjoyed pretty much all of them. And I thought this was a very, very solid high-level volume. This one, Beyond the Rue Morgue, I think there was one story. I think it was the second one. I'm not going to look up the name. Sorry, too lazy. Yeah, that was very well written. It was very good. But I found the stories honestly quite hit and miss. I would say that this is a book which it's so-so. It's not terrible. You could give it a look for sure. It's not a waste of time. But I didn't find any. When I think about it now, there's nothing that really kind of sticks in my mind as beyond the second story. And I enjoyed the second story second or third story, because it was very, very well written. I enjoyed the writing style. So I would say it was okay. I wouldn't say give it a swerve, but I found it a bit hit and miss. So anyway, that's my review of these three dark detective horror stories, horror books. Sorry, I'm a bit out there today. If you have any, if you've read any of these books, or you have any comments or any suggestions or any criticisms even, heaven forbid, please let me know in the comments below, and we can maybe start a discussion. So anyway, in the unlikely event that anyone actually watched this video all the way to the end, thank you for watching. And if you liked what you have seen, please consider subscribing and liking, or liking and subscribing. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.